leaps, whether big or small, are going forward. Sorry, Cassandra, what you say?
It's the recording is in progress. We started at 5:05. It's 5:05. We are recording now. I'm going to hit mute all and then turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And now everyone has gone quiet. They're listening to the silence of lip balm in this absurdist day number 2. Welcome, everybody. Lip balm now has been around for over 4 years. We are very proud of that fact, and we will continue to infinity. Yesterday we had an amazing show with Theatre of the Absurd Part 1, which included Andrew, Oz Hardwick from the UK, Richard Peabody, who runs the amazing journal Gargoyle. Denise de Homel was supposed to join us, but she had a power outage, so she couldn't. And I read a couple of her poems. We had Bob Archambault reading from his new Belgian surrealist twinned book. David Chentorby and Michael Gucci. We had Tony Kitt and Leah Graham. And we had an amazing appearance by Astrid Detterman, who read Neruda, and then Jabberwocky with her brother dancing with an animal mask behind her. We had movies from Jay Quatt and his partner, Chess. We had a fantastic movie from Jeff, our co-host, who's been trying to get to play that movie for a long time. But today, we are absolutely delighted to have some of our good friends reading from their funniest and most absurd selves. And they include tonight Andrew Joron, Anne Caldwell, a Serpentwoman, Adeena, Karasick, Clayre Benzadon, Keith Carrol, John Bradley, Daniel Nestor, Will Alexander, and from Hedgehoggie, who, as you shall see, is very eloquent. But before we start with this fantastic show, let's hear from one of my co-hosts, Jeffrey Cyphers Wright, who received his MFA after studying with Allen Ginsberg. Jeff is known as a new romantic poet, but he's also a publisher, critic, eco-activist, impresario, filmmaker, puppeteer, and artist. He's the author of 19 books of poetry, including Blue Lyre and Party Everywhere. His poems have appeared in the Cafe Review, the New American Writing, the Brooklyn Rail, the Hurricane Review, Posit, and many others. His recent work also appears in the anthologies Best American Poetry, New York Insiders, and Contemporary Surrealist and Magical Realist Poetry. Jeff's latest work is a book of sonnets and artwork called Doppelgangster, which came out with my own Mad Hat Press, and it's a wonderful book. Please go out and get it. And he recently won the Sir Vision James Tate Prize. I forget the name of the book. It already came out, Jeff, right?
Fuel for Love.
There you go. Fuel for Love.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. And I'm just going to read one poem here from the New American Writing that just came out. And I'm glad to see Mark and some fellow people in there. Of course, Mark has a big hand in this now. And before, hey, wait a minute, I was going to say something. Oh, Rufus is back. What did you want to do, Rufus? I hope it's not too long. No. Listen, I wanted to share with you the names of these fake cocktails. Organ Deity, Wrinkled Irony, Bad Axe, The Smite, Makeup Sex, The Crying Fireman, Rooster Dog, Trick Whistle, Shooby Doo, Well, I see do is spelled D-E-W. Yeah, of course. Shooby-Doo, Lulu's Mailbox, Neon Peacock, Red Orgy, Orgasms 3. Did you write that all by yourself? Actually, Heller Levinson helped me write that. I hope he's not too embarrassed. Thank you, Rufus. Happy birthday, Mark. Rufus thinks it's always your birthday, Mark. Now I would just like to read the sonnet and thank everybody for coming out today. And this is called Yours Truly. The western sky is a blank check, a blue streak squeezed between cloud banks. Christmas lights festoon a fire escape. A grandma lugs home a Hot Wheels set. Dangerous hope limbs the holes inside me. I burn like a prayer on a wire. I am a hotel full of surprise guests. You are a holiday, 1,000 keys. I am happy because I have everything, even doubt. Crushed diamonds sifted with ash. And the pentimento of coming loss wavers like the signature of a ghost. Only this can I say for sure. I was yours. We made sparks fly from the stars' spurs. All right. And now, gives me great pleasure to introduce our longstanding host, Miss Cassandra Atherton. Cassandra is an award-winning prose poet and international expert on prose poems. Her prose poetry is widely anthologized and has been translated into Japanese, Chinese, and Korean. Cassandra has published more than 30 books and is currently writing an illustrated book of prose poetry on the Hiroshima Maidens, with funding from the Australia Council and the Victorian government. Cassandra co-wrote prose poetry, an introduction, and co-edited the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. She's commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. And we're all so glad you're here, Cassandra Atherton.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Yeah, it's Monday morning here, so I'm pleased to be able to see you all before I go to work. I'd like to read a poem from a book that I published a long time ago, which is has just popped up thanks to Thomas Moody on the Best American Poetry blog, which was a nice surprise. And I have a wonderful comment from Cindy there. So I thought I would read a bit of a silly poem I wrote a while ago called Lunacy and the Arrangement of Books. Your new bookshelves are driving Deweyites mad. Spinner wheels in hand, they ache to enforce the decimal classification system on your vertical timber. Pragmatist systemizers, it doesn't matter which Dewey you prefer, Melville, John, the library cat, or even Huey and Louie's brother, they all believe in shelf diagnosis. So choose your own system, but ask yourself, is Emma inappropriately touching Moby Dick? Is Don Juan pressed up against Clarissa or lying on top of Jane Eyre? Don't put Madame Bovary and Anna Karenina too close to the edge. And remember that given half a chance, the brothers Karamazov will lean on Little Women. Whatever you do, make sure you keep American Psycho in the plastic wrapper. Frankenstein can bring some life to your Gothic collection, but keep Dracula away from the monk and keep Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in separate sections. Don't worry if you lose the Invisible Man. Voss will go looking for him. I suppose you could order your books by the color of their spine or the birthplace of their author, but that kind of creative intelligence is, in the end, just experimental logic. So there's a bit of a blast from the past. And now one of my favorite things to do is introduce the incredible Mark Vincennes. Please join in. Some of you might remember parts of this very exciting bio from yesterday, or because you're a regular and you hear me read it all the time. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published over 40 books of poetry, translations, and fiction, including more recently The Pearl Diver of Irun Mani, The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars, and The Mayfly Codex. Forthcoming poetry collections are Spells for the Wicked with Unlikely Books, Ironclad with Spite and Dival, and No More Animal Poems with White Pine Press. Mark is also a prolific translator and has translated from the German, Romanian, and French. He's published 11 books of translations, most recently an Audible Blue Selected Poems 1963 to 2016 by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist, I hear you say his name, Klaus Mertz. It won the 2023 Massachusetts Book Prize for Translated Literature. His own work has been translated into many languages, including this very long list: Japanese, Chinese, Russian, French, Italian, Spanish, Romanian, Greek, German, Icelandic, and Pig Latin, I'm going to add there too. He is currently working on a novel entitled The Age of Occasions. Vincenz is editor and publisher of the Stellar Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. Here we go, people. He's lived all around the world, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural western Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, Melville's inspiration for Moby Dick, where there are still more six-spotted tiger beetles, black caterpillar hunters, and emerald euphoria than bipedal hominids. I'd love a bit of emerald euphoria in my life, given it's a Monday. I think Roxy's got some for herself. So, Mark, what's going on? You got a poem?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm going to go, I'm going to give you 3 short poems from Einstein Fledermaus, which is a fantastic book that came out with Servision. And it is one of the few books that just basically came out the way it was and just was there. So this is called Unlearning the Ropes. The Republic, they say, must be upheld at all costs. Thousands of fate are at stake, but almost no advice. What are your demands, they say? No, we are prepared to serve any loss as long as you stay 6 feet away. Her apathy is reflected in her face as she doles out soup and buttered bread. Which cloud? She says, scattering a handful of Parmesan. The old man sighs, remembering last summer when the bamboo reeds were green, remembering the abundance of bees. All of their prophecies come true, he says, blowing on his spoon. Heavy water. Everything measured can be seen from the outside. We work slowly in blown glass and cut crystal, someplace else the rain is no more. The old handle on which the winch creaks and whines, the bucket is dry. What great freedom have we won ourselves with this, he thinks. Out in the pasture, the weeds are taking over. The cows have xylophones for ribs. The earth parched is singing, reach for the black oil inside me. And from there we go to oil painting, liquefaction. Like Van Gogh, we reach for the perfect line or spiral. You will have heard that once we amused ourselves in our white winter fleece with clouds floating outward. We wished to swim in the clouds, wanted to give the wasteland new color. But scaffolding rose to block the view. But soon the clock strikes 6, and a cloud of dust from the galaxy, or a lightness, or some strange form of happiness makes me go into the woods. I count the naked minutes out here, listening to bark scrape over a whole epoch of lines. You know nothing of love, the lines seem to say. A raccoon comes into the picture with all her whiskers. She stirs beneath the trees like she's making a soup. Far beneath, the mouse sleeps in her hollows. Meanwhile, the snow falls, coating every surface with her tiny underfeathers. Suddenly, everything comes into focus. In an instant, a spray of faces. Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn, Jimmy Dean, Clark Gable, even Rudolph Valentino on a silent screen in his pantaloons, knee-high boots and a saber. Tarzan yodels, swinging wildly with his monkeys in ways you've never seen. And then the footprints in the snow, all clear evidence you have been here once before. And now I am delighted to introduce our first special feature for tonight, who is Anne Caldwell, a poet and education specialist based in West Yorkshire, UK. She works for the Open University as well as the Royal Literary Fund. Anne has published a number of poetry collections, including Painting the Spiral Staircase. She was also co-editor of the Valley Press Anthology of Prose Poetry and the Theory and Practice of Prose Poetry from Routledge, alongside Oz Hardwick. Anne's fourth collection of prose poetry, Alice and the North, came out in November 2020 and is a love letter to the north of England. Her latest pamphlet is Neither Here Nor There, from Survision, Ireland, and it won the James Tate Prize and was published earlier this year. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much indeed. Cheers, everyone. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yes. Fantastic. Okay. I'd like to read the first prose poem from Neither Here Nor There, which came out earlier this year, and it's called Aqueduct. Walls were less rigid when I was young. Bedroom walls expanded when love bloomed and contracted when grief swallowed the family, making it lemon sour and pithy. Hiding in the bottom of the wardrobe, I would listen to the bitterness of mother and father. I'd a penknife, a lucky stone, and a ball of string. I owned a hand-me-down bike and found a cycle route to Asprey, cutting beneath the canal aqueduct. The air was damp and cool, the brickwork smothered in moss. A stalactite childhood laid here, lingering beneath this body of water, beneath tadpoles and crested newts, beneath rusted shopping trolleys and lead fishing sinkers. That first poem in this pamphlet collection, I think, demonstrates my kind of complete love of prose poetry and what it can do. It sort of reverberates for me between different states of mind, between the past and the present, hovering somewhere between water and air. And that sort of sums up this collection, Neither Here Nor There. It was written partly in lockdown, going into sort of years after that. And the second poem I'd like to read, prose poem, is called The Glass Blower, and you'll see some of those influences that I talked about here. Glass blower. And this dim-lit life is a glass vase in the making, needs blowing and warping. Alice loads her rod with molten liquid from the furnace, rolling the orange glow beneath 900 degrees in wet newspaper. Life begins to cool a little and harden. She doesn't wear gloves as she dips the glass in poldered cobalt. She blows, then places her thumb over the rod until the glass begins to swell into a sphere, catching an air bubble at its center. Keep turning, keep blowing, find life's heat and joy. Don't stop moving. The next prose poem I'd like to read was featured in another anthology called 100 Days of Solitude, and it's called Blue. It's also within the Sure Vision pamphlet. Blue. For now, we're marooned and separate, self-isolating in the face of what's to come. My son's as gloomy as a gunboat ferrying up and down the channel of his life so far. His navigation's unclear, and circumstances take an unexpected turn, cutting across the rapids. Yet here on the moors, the curlews have returned, and they're nesting in the field above top brink. I walked the hills at dusk last night and heard them bubbling and murmuring to each other like water from a spring. For today the sky is Eve's Klein blue, no planes, just endless crows circling overhead. You might have heard Cleo, my cat, joining in with that prose poem there. She's sort of woken up and decided tonight's an event where an appearance must be needed. And finally, I'd like to read a poem called Desire Path, which is based partly on sort of strolling around the streets of Manchester in the UK where I live. But it's also a Manchester that's kind of turned into a surreal landscape, and it's called Desire Path. I dream of trees with blunt fingers and stars with sharp edges, an emerald city growing larger every time I close my eyes. The skyline shimmers in the distance just out of reach. Above the rooftops, the sky is hazy and stormy, heavier than normal, as if all the woes of the world were pressing down. Single men and women are cocooned behind closed doors. Oh, that's the other cat joining in, by the way. Gazing out at the blue moon through blinds, curtains, plate glass, smoke screens, triple glazing and high perimeter fences. I think of the desire path that cuts from the cathedral to the train station, past the fountain and a precious stretch of green. The dirt route crosses the garden of the Music Academy, skirting the medieval library with oak tables and manuscripts chained to shelves. I remember holding hands, the touch of him, skin to skin, the whirls of his fingertips, palms roughened by years in the theatre workshop, sanding and planing. And the city streets, with their blunt fingers, seem to be waving. I'm sure they're waving, not drowning. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yay. All right, Dan Caldwell, that was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Always lovely to hear that English accent, right? So, Adeena Karasick, it's a pleasure to going to be hearing my good friend Adeena Karasick, everybody's friend. Adeena, if I may, is a word NATO, a word cane word cyclotron implosion spray, a passion flowering word bouquet. And she's also super complicated. And that was just kind of a teaser. She's going to take what I just did and take it from like a cat 1 to a cat 12 and a half. She's also got a PhD. She's a New York based, we're so lucky, Canadian poet who travels worldwide, performing, filmmaking, doing cultural theories and making up stuff. She's got 18 books out, poetry and poetics. And her most recent books include, and I love this because she did visualizations with the great Warren Lehrer, and this book is called Erato, the Book of Lumentations. And she's got another one there from, those are 2 books, sorry, no, that's 1 book, published by Lavender Inc. And then also a film called that. And I love Eratomania, there it is, Eratomania. And Adeena did that AE ligature thing where they stick together the A and the E. So she's going to send us all to the past and the present and the future. Adeena Karasick.
Oh, thank you. Hey, Lip Bombers. It's so great to be here. Last time I read during COVID, I think it was the time of the pirates. Arr. Thank you, Mark and Jeff, for having me back. And great to be here with a range of work in my little 8 minutes, both recent and new, starting off with a piece in the wake of all the recent catastrophe in the Middle East. Thinking about how everything has been palimpsestically layered through contested histories and herstories and socioeconomic policies, pulsing and porous, how everything has always already been occupied. So this page is an occupied territory. Through research, sanctuary, synchronies, anachronies, iniquities, occupado, occupato, occupare, occupat, occupy. This page is an occupied territory of idiomatic traditions, collisions, divisions, a code meshing of illegalities, legalities, passwords, watchwords, past loan words. This page is a war zone, a non-homogeneous environment of shifting congruence, a confluence of flexible lexicon, scissions, visions, revisions, invasions of jagged axes, axial efflux imprinted on fleshy fibers, cotton, weaves, wood, rice, wheat, straw, flax, silk, skin, circuits, contrasts, discords, accords imprinted in the proxy, thought, troughs, inhabitable palimpsest of roughed up, recombinant, itinerant, rigged toward contours, and is making you its co-host. This page has already been occupied, coated with resistance, obscenity, and abandon and drowning in the stained refrain of desolate lines, linen, lignin aligned, and the clatter of discorded concordances, scattered ordinances scrawled in impossible sobs, ghost lips, silk, spun, shreds, shrouds, shards, shells, stutters, occupied like the seat, wall, street, cell, seabed, sky of orbital debris, self-replicating pathogens, paronyms, topologies, cartographies, morphologies, technologies, data, this coup by the Iraq, by the vermouth, my mouth, by your circ, sweat, tongue, tat, lick, lung, occupied by these letters, this night of naked upheaval, archaic arts, inks, irks, curse, discoursing whispers, slaughters, curtails, curtains, compass, collapse, occupied with sweeps, slakes, stakes, straps, sod, squalor, cinders, abscess, obstinate, dominance, ominence, dissonance, imminence, impermanence, all porous and tormented between peace, posits, paucity, opacity, prosody, porosity, parse, press, vex, lex, lax, packs of supple madness in the rasp of today. This page is a war zone, a corazon of residual traces, tensions, triggers of elaborate aberrance, elaborate collaboratives laboring in plots, plans, protests, plans, plague, graves, grapples, groans, gropes of measured memory, murmurs, amors, mergers, turning to cities, scripts, splice, stats, sonic, strata, sediments, measured to days, bodies, brackets of fractured inscription, encryption, forgeries, of ritual fragilities, imparts, ramparts, tracks, tempos, ripped, meridians, idioms. This page is a war zone and has been so occupied, entangled in shadows, marrow, screams, skulls, fails, folds, flux, forms, peripheries, referees, reveries, rivalries, fertile, free zone, perfumes, flues, fields, fleas in the porous aura of dead saporia pulsing in the rivering seas, sticky toxicity of remodulated memory, occuparati, occupato, occupare, occupatum, occupare, occupry, occupre. Okay, so this next piece is some excerpts from the book Illuminations portion of the Erotomania book. It's a homophonic translation of the Book of Lamentations, resituating the source text to the mourning, the destruction and unrest of the present moment. So here's a couple pages from that. The theurgy of delight is a drowning down, the urgence of the light is a drowning dawn, the resurgence of the light is adoring drawn, a drowning down, a drowning dawn, the urgence, a drowning, a dawning, a knotted dawn, the delights of the light resurgent, a light in the urgent emergence to light in the days of our hunger. As Kier curls and swirl, spurred, lure, stirred, spur of porous roar, whose blade frayed for a furry fury, fiery folly flares in the florid lore of soaring horror in the ripped, rocked, lot. So pass through me in the folded fancy of cracked madness, contoured in shivering silhouettes, wet, arete, pirouette of softened kisses, brackets, pastures, pulsing sleepless, through scarred triggers, pass through me, fleeced in the non-censors of fissured swarms, through tongued orange tombs, settling ash, through the sift of symptom stalls whose wills wail whirl in the weave of social flesh, through tattered shadows, margins, dizzying wounds, howls, spurs, spores, silence, cinders, blood, as the walls bear down, weeping in the black and unyielding light, a light in our own shivering dream, through the light of fat language, the light of stretch testing, widening fear, the light of untidy probes which smell like gags, thievery, acrobat, dancing bears, pass through me, through the light of the distance, screaming in the nostalgia of the present, and says, fly me by night to the river, derive over the rainbow, fly me faster than angels, so fly as the sky, flying without wings, as sparks fly on fleurage. I was born to fly, so fly with me through the flux of form, to refuel, volley, veils, balls, vole, river, luminous, voluminous, free flight and fly, flug me by the sea of your palms, fly me like a butterfly, fly as flamingos fly in the coop, fly free and fly blind, buttressed from the inside like a flying fuck on the fly to the moon over the dateline as the sky flies away. Okay. Is that, here, I can't see myself. There we are. Is that time?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Fantastic. It was fantastic.
All right, thanks. And just by the way, I'm going to be on sabbatical starting in January and touring in Europe. So if any of you are elsewhere based and interested, will you please contact me and maybe we can make something happen. Thanks.
Sounds good, Adeena. I'm going to invite you to my live show up in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. So I'll be in touch. Thanks so much. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
Next, we hear from the illimitable Serpentwoman.
Who has a day job as Roxy Power. Thanks, Mark, for your invitation to be Serpentwoman last Saturday night, right before we did the first of a two-part radio and podcast interview for his book. The King of Prussia is Drunk on Stars, and I'll post the link in the chat. So I reference and collage words of Cage, Enzaldua, God, Milton, and some absurdists with mostly my poems and recent words written in the state of vertigo, which I've had for a few days. Like snakes on a plane, my head is the plane. And I can't decide if I like my little snakes going in and out of the Northern Lights, but we'll see. A lecture on something. Summoning John Cage's lecture on nothing. I am here. and there is nothing to say. Those who wish to get somewhere, let them leave at any moment. What we require is silence. But what silence requires is that I go on talking. Silence! I have something to say and I'm hissing it. I may have a hissy fit 24 days before the election. I am Serpentwoman. Serpent woman? I am pent up, must release. Am I a sir? The Aztec and Quatlique, lady of the serpent skirts, was both and very sexual. They cut off her serpents. Not hers, not hers. She just popped out of a snake egg, a little lady in white robes. Medusa's face turned women to stone, and all the whinging since. Yes, I'm turning to stone because you ain't coming home. Why ain't you coming home? If I'm turning to stone, you've been gone for so long and I can't carry on. Yes, I'm turning to stone. You ask the rope. We rooting inexhaustible flesh, back to nameless Ariadne. Stripped, we unmoored make haste to thread our head through knots. Line involves a coil, snake in a basket of flowers, of words unstrung. Possessive pronouns hiss in our empty pockets, her unraveling thread of broken pearls white and behind her. Trust in me, just in me. Shut your eyes and trust in me. Eve, all pent up, bit those juicy apples, and the rest was all heel bite and head crush. Paradise lost. Oh, Eve, in evil hour, didst thou give ear to that false worm which leaves us naked then of honor void? What words have passed thy lips, Adam? Severe. Hadst thou been there, thou couldst not have discerned fraud in the serpent speaking as he spake, and I'd still be a lifeless rib. God took a dim view and cursed them with mortality, painful birth, women's secondary status, thorns and thistles, and all the rest. Cue Eurydice, bitten on her head, heel, by the snake, swept off by Hades. Stalk yourself. The wild god beyond you lingers. A bush of eyes blinking. Underworld hymn of rivers on fire. Lava has stung your root tips to Orphic song. Who would believe the rivers and stones all singing? What waits in the garden so full, untasted, beyond your touch? You leave so much. Lingering drops of green upon your lips. That sound in the grass? Remember something unlearned, mortal. Nights and crickets, not the snake-bitten swoon and plunge to immortality. Up ahead, a ringing of stones, a rain of cries because you taught the rivers to cry, the trees to howl with your song, echoing an eternity you have not yet earned. Begin to pay. Begin. Camus' myth of Sisyphus started the whole absurdism craze. He said, absurdity comes from the absence of God, suffering, and the certainty of death, the suffering saccatash of death. Our reason cannot accept this fate. We want happiness. The absurd is born of this unreasonable silence of the world. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Can you? Inside our own weather, we whistle a vortex that sounds like, I'm coming, hold on a sec, while friends' fingers purple and slip from the cornice. Was it a cornice or a ledge? Let's go with ledge. Now let's rewind. I don't like her falling. Let's call the whole hanging by her fingernails thing a metaphor before she dropped it. Let begones be begones. Beckett. Nothing is funnier than unhappiness. It's the most comical thing in the world. Start, said l'enfer, c'est les autres. Hell is other people. A tribal dance of denial when we, similar and simultaneous in dread, recognizing quiet, opened to the sound of ourselves beating inside each other. Now so clear, whereas before, Ionesco turned those who didn't resist into rhinoceroses. Do you want that? Do something, do something. What shit can fit on a postcard in a swing state? Extra credit I give to my students to write them. I was dreaming, in my dreaming, I saw a serpent with aspect fair, and it whispered words of histum. It's decreed the people rule. People have the power. People have the power. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Can you? Must we roll back down the hill? What plans do you have for the violence that may break out on election day? Be a caribou. Arbitrate the coming ennui with a maxim from Aurelius. By apathia, I didn't mean apathy of the perpetual American adolescence. 78 and still in high school. Done, says my phone when I send words away. Would that I could with him. Wherever your fancy lets loose a little jouissance, a little elevated yop, it gets triangulated by history. Grace to be merely ignored, rather than flung by pincers into an acid bath of massified rage. I know you know. I know you know what I mean. Oh, changeling, cheerio. By apathia, Aurelius didn't mean lassitude, more like control yourself before you yop. Be a caribou and carry us across the glistening snow, trotting over ice with their sharp hooves, crackle grunting during the rut, chins a waggle, they yawn, carrying us into the silence. Or be a snake, sleeping lidless at night, seeing all. A wiggly little Cassandra, prophetess with restless leg syndrome, with nothing to say at first, and then you can't shut her up. When will the story form? I could have come out a different color. Me and the inside person are going to be laid off. Scabanaria, what enders on? I have to hurry on, just because I have 3 climates. Bye. 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 I'll be in touch.
Thank you, Serpentwoman.
So welcome. My pleasure.
Next, we hear from Will Alexander, who works in multiple genres. In addition to being a poet, Will is also a novelist, essayist, a phonist, a playwright, philosopher, visual artist, and pianist. Will's influences range from poetic practitioners such as Aimé Césaire, Bob Kaufman, André Breton, Antonin Artaud, and Philip Lamantia, who I know also Andrew is very close to, and to the encompassing paradigm of Sri Aurobindo integral yoga and the Egyptian worldview as understood by Chihé and Anta Diop and R.A. Swaller del Lubis. The latter is central to Will's expanding inner range, which has allowed him to access to levels of mind beyond the 3-dimensional boundary. He thereby explores the full dimensionality of each word. For him, each word has access not only to the median level of three-dimensional experience, but also partakes of experience on both the supra and subconscious planes. Will's praxis of language is not unlike the Mayan numerical world, where each letter of the alphabet spontaneously engages in non-limit. Thus, all fields of experience are open for exploration: art, physics, botany, history, astronomy, architecture, and poetics. Will's books include Asia and Haiti, the Sri Lankan Laxadrome, Compression and Purity, Sunrise in Armageddon, Diary of Sin, Inside the Earthquake Palace, Toward the Primeval Lightning Field, and Mirach Speaks to His Grammatical Transparents. Will lives in the City of Angels. Welcome, Will. You need to unmute, my friend. Mon ami.
Thank you
Okay.
for the introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'm gonna start here with a new book of work I'm working on. It's called Random Cellular States. And I read this poem in recent visit to Aranya. And this is called Visitation as Centigrade. Light that dispels its articulated essence as mesmerism, that articulates its own essence as mesmerism, being nuanced by filigree, that pre-ignites its own chirality. Here there is prefigurement by chimerical essence, by lack that can be described by defensive maneuver. This again being mesmerism by ion, by articulate nervous calamity by dawn, by 20 suns exploding as blue light subsumed as articulated nerve ends, not as brazen suggestion, but as higher inevitability. Not, for instance, as cognitive codex, but atoms on fire merging with darkness as unified transmission, as instantaneous light that explodes by generating trapezoidal fertility as articulated nomos. This being solar form as unknown language, sweeping away horizons that both explodes and etches its own formation, being diaphanous centigrade as cartographical charisma that approaches its own summation, not as etching or fossil that explodes, simultaneous with its own horizon. And this following piece will be from the same forthcoming volume. It's called Hyperspatial Rotation. Scripted according to the capacity of compound isolation, an evolutionary whirling of levels that translate to cellular blizzards that magically as hyperstates, as impalpable caverns that rise and transmute consciousness. For the individual, these psychic cellular states cast transparent wattage that authors inscrutable singularity as pattern, alchemically contending with friction itself. This being a level where one can never be scripted as toneless cartographical blankness, but where communication plies itself endemic with riverine overarching fragmentation. One becomes attuned to borderless grammar at one with pouring psychic waves, sans ideology pouring from compound quotidian scale that persists as crystal-like, charged with an interior kinetic that issues from rotating figures in the mind. They being none other than emanates as stunning peripheral figures casting implausible wavelengths from shadow. There then exists a living realm of aural transmission from less direct planes that authors itself as optical aurality, so as to hear via anterior modes thought that erupts as spectacular hybridity. That's from a new coming state of works that I'm in the midst of scripting at present. The whole thing is to evolve, for me, the living state by the ear, by what you can hear. By the way, the oral state is the last state that you lose before you go into permanent surcease. It's the last living state of connection to the planet. And I think at the same time, the connecting to the whole or greater cosmos. And that's what we need to do right now, I think, is not to be didactic, but to rise from ourselves into ourselves, beyond ourselves, into another through way, not as entertainment, but as a like I call it a philosophical pumice that strengthens the interior being. And this is what my practice is about, is strengthening the interior being. And that's about not non-didactic, but living language that moves and builds and goes beyond itself. So I want to thank you guys and thank Mark for having me on. And I just wanted to, rest up after my last adventure and going on to new adventures right now. So thank you for having me, and we'll talk soon. I'll have that book to you coming up next week. Thank you so much.
Sounds great, Will. Thanks so much for joining us. Really delving deep into language, Will Alexander. Next, we need to hear from someone we've never heard from before, and that's Hannah Griego, who's a writer in Washington, D.C. She edits novels and prose collections for Alan Squire, where her anthology, Already Gone, was published in 2023. Hannah's own work can be read in the Washington Post, Al Jazeera, Craft, Split Lip, Shenandoah, The Rumpus Brevity, Poet Law, Fairy Tale Review, Passages North, and many more. Are you there, Hannah?
I'm here. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to meet you. Thank you, Richard, for introducing me to this group. I'm so excited to be here. I am only an occasional poet. I primarily write fiction and nonfiction. So I am going to read one poem and then a very short story to sort of shift us a little bit. Hope that's okay. So this is a prose poem I had out in Fairy Tale Review, and it's called If You Were Red Riding Hood. If you were Red Riding Hood and I found you, sniffed you out on the path with your basket, your cape, your soft hair, your pink-orange freckles lit by the sun piercing the canopy, and if I jumped out, held up my thick paws and clipped nails, opened my mouth wide to show not teeth, but hunger, not teeth, but patience, as you walked this forest over and over, as I smelled the wishes rising from your skin, smelled the jail smell of your life, of this routine of caregiving, of caring, of giving, and if I searched and found the red haloing your head, the fire of everything you wanted to be, everything your mother and grandmother and great-grandmother wanted you to be, if you cried out, but it wasn't fear, and then touched me, traced the pads of my palms and said, what big hands you have, said, you're so hungry, said, I used to fear this path. Then I could finally tell you I'm not really a wolf, and you'd run your fingers up my arms, dig the tips down through the fur to my skin and say, girls can be wolves too. If you reached up to my lips, pushing your hands into my mouth, if you said, take me someplace new, as I tried to whisper around you, my mouth full, as I tried to tell you, let the axe man come, I'll slice myself open, you'd hush me, widen my mouth, push in up to your elbows, crawl all the way inside, and I'd turn and run the both of us from these woods. Thank you. And this last piece, the second piece, is a very strange and I think absurd short story called Just a Shot Away. I write a lot of pieces about parenthood that lean into the absurd, lean into the what if. So this was from X-Ray Literary Journal, just a shot away. I can picture Mark's face, the surprised V between his eyes as he watches the news, or answers his phone at 2 a.m. or opens the door to 2 police officers. Who knows how he first finds out? But I know he's shocked, absolutely floored, in full denial. This has to be a mistake, he insists. Nat would never, she barely even. We have video footage, they tell him. We have a clip of your wife shooting a pretty blonde bank teller right in the face. And Mark says, my wife? Natalie? She couldn't. We have another one of her blowing up a gas station, my man, spraying gas all over a young man's brand new pickup truck, the 30-day tags curling in the wet, the gun rack dripping, and her flicking a lit match at that truck like she didn't care if she went up in flames too. But don't worry, she's a fast little number, as you must know. She smiled at the security camera and took off in a neon green Suzuki Samurai. It was practically held together with duct tape, it was so old. That's not your car, right? Not according to state records. A Suzuki Samurai. Mark says, I didn't know those were still street legal. Where did she get it? He pauses before asking almost hopefully, did she steal it? No idea. We couldn't make out the plates. But she drove off with these 2 other women. Hot young things, too. Has your wife ever mentioned an interest in women? Women, Mark says. And a whole new world of possibilities opens up, as if he's been blindfolded and now he can see. And right then, Joey comes in, rubbing his own eyes, his pajama bottoms sagging in the back from his pull-up. Mommy, he asks, is Mommy back? No, Mommy's some kind of serial killer lesbian now, Mark says, and the words feel true. They feel good. They roll off his tongue with a buttery victimhood that settles his nerves, relaxes his tight neck and shoulders. All the arguments, the simmering shame. He knew all along the problem wasn't him. We'll get you a nanny, he whispers into our son's soft hair. Maybe Granny and Gramps can come stay with us for a while. You're safe, kiddo. Don't worry about Mommy. I can picture his face, the V between his eyes smoothing out as he walks Joey back to his bedroom. I should feel more than a slight pang at the idea of never seeing my kid again, but all I feel is relief. A luxurious, deep-lung breath that I hold for a second and then let out. Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, so much for joining us. Delighted to have you. So next we hear from Clayre Benzadon, who's a queer poet, adjunct professor, and activist from Florida. Clayre has been awarded the 2019 Alfred Boas Poetry Prize for her poem Linguistic Rewilding. Her chapbook Liminal Zenith was published by Vision Books in 2019, and she's been published in many places, including Swim magazine, Only magazine, and Blue Stem magazine. Welcome, Clayre.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I love being in this community, and getting to hear everyone's works has been such a pleasure. So I'm going to be reading a couple of newish pieces. They're quite short. So yeah, just sit back and enjoy. Raspberry. My hands drink, sip tulips when they mold soil in the garden of blossom dreams. My hands arrange a flower bed of resolve, a hive of dahlias. Ruby drupelets cap tips of fingers like dorm room bulbs being absorbed by sea star rays. These raspberries get tied loose on vine around a horse's body, change from red, purple, gold, and black, catch the witch tricking the red wild homes. A bouquet of hair, only rain drips from the tips, the strands. The red winding curls are a witch's brew in the wind, scent of a raspberry flower bed drooping full, and wild, red, wild. Next piece is titled It's Like This. Death is a caper, a bob. You keep twirling towards it until the blur of it becomes as drenched as flavor and as sweet as the ending ebb. You are inside lemon sauce, swimming in piccata. No, you are sleeping in the lemon's mouth, gleaming with dream, saturated in the last magic. Death is like loving you, like popping an ollie over fire hydrants. I'm a kid watching how close my leg stands onto it, watching how near me and the exhilaration gets before I break down, tear open, splinter a soggy segment, puncture flotation and marinated capes, those that line the cracked crevices of an iced-over lake, the abyss of you everywhere. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps death is the last blue powdery gumball inside the oxidated machine mounted right before the exit of a Toys R Us. Yes, us as figurines when we were younger, the store a playground of overwhelming novelty, remember? You put a coin inside, almost as dirty as the machine itself. Listen to the crank. No one carries them anymore, quarters, and so that gumball is the last sense of normalcy. It rolls down. You cup your hand around the circular portal. Globe it in your hand, then hold the world, me, in your mouth. Gobsmack the ball like those jawbreakers you used to buy at Disney. Keep looking at it for a whole week, waiting to get to the last color. Perhaps it is blue, if our heaven is ever blue. All right, this next piece is titled The Imperative. Tell me why the fern maps their leaves so patternly. Kiss me while you murmur mnemonics, memories in my ear. Wait, I found a plum on icebox, fermenting without its stem on. Oye, light a match right underneath your own hand. Don't burn yourself if you can help it. Listen, potatoes are the bread and butter of my habits, fried mind, oiled up alertness, a half-baked plan. You're damn right, the oyster always echoes your thoughts, then crack them open right in front of you. I will go towards the end of the page's line because I heard a noxious noise and it wouldn't stop. This one's titled Green Dream. Green Dream. Before the world was measured by fruit, I forgot the color iguana existed. I could have accidentally stepped into the chameleon's maw. It's blended in features granny apple, moonball grape, kiwi. I could have tamed the fruit creature by munching or balling its source of light or flight. It would have flipped over, spliced a new term like green beans or green dream. Of course, wheat is the first living strain to come to mind, but maybe it isn't so vivid, or high time to wear the shades this way. A green dream can also be a vision of what our future holds, city buildings now floating as green bottles, all the trapped and netted bodies of verdant melting vantage point witnessing the faint color of chameleon, marking its last celadon gooseberry footprint. I have a last poem here. And this one is dedicated to me by the poet John Allen. So I want to thank him. I will try my best to pronounce these words. This poem is titled Dry Ophelia. Unformed and anonymous, urgently pinched in waves of fin dispersion, a distance face, canocery atoms, ablatory beauty, untucked, present as unproposed light, tightrope of juniper stars, of cosmic candelabra, unsure where to fade, dry Ophelia, carrying bouquets neither real nor artificial, christening a sleeping sea with the upright star of a new womanhood. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Clara. And next, we hear from Andrew Joron, who is a poet, essayist, and speculative fiction writer. Andrew's poetry collections include The Absolute Letter from Flood Editions in 2017 and Trance Archive, new and selected poems from City Lights in 2010. Andrew's work of speculative fiction, 0O or O0, was published by Black Square Editions in 2022. The Cryat Zero selection of his prose poems and critical essays was published by Counterpath in 2007. From the German, he has translated the literary essays of Marxist utopian philosopher Ernst Bloch and The Perpetual Motion Machine by the proto-Dada fantasist Paul Scherbart. As a musician, Andrew plays the theremin in various experimental and free jazz ensembles, He teaches creative writing at San Francisco State University, and he's a good friend. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I've been playing the theremin with Will Alexander on piano for a while now. Whenever we manage to be in the same city at the same time, we try to make that happen. So very happy to be here in this room with amazing company and some good friends. I have to say that Roxy, your reading made an impression on me. I heard silence, references to silence and Camus on the absurd coming together. I was also going to frame my reading with a quote from Camus on the absurd. Unfortunately, you didn't read this particular quote that I want to read here. But I also changed up what I was going to read because of the references to silence. I pulled out some of my aphorisms on silence. And so thanks for that inspiration, Roxy. Here's Albert Camus. This is a quote that Roxy did not read on the absurd. I said that the world is absurd, but I was too hasty. This world in itself is not reasonable. That is all that can be said. But what is absurd is the confrontation of this irrationality and the wild longing for clarity whose call echoes in the human heart. The absurd depends as much on humans as on the world. So just a nod to today's theme of the absurd. And here now are some aphorisms on silence. From my collection, The Sound Mirror. There are 8 silences, 8 collections of silence here. First silence. Silence waits for an answer. Silence, endlessly divided, equals 1. Silence always means more than it says. The universal silence is open-mouthed. Second silence. Silence is an attribute of something, not nothing. Silence is the presence of nothing within something. In the silence of solitude, release. In the silence of a multitude, confinement. The moon reflects the silence of the sun. Third silence. Noise is original. Silence has no history. Silence cannot move or be moved. Silence can move only beyond space itself. Silence, like poetry, is neither true nor false. Fourth silence. Le silence éternel de ces espaces infinis m'effraie. Silence needs no translation. In this, it resembles a scream. We learn to speak before we learn to be silent. Writing is the silencing of speech. Fifth silence. Ceaselessness, like silence, is always suspended at the last. Silence weighs more than stone. 0 is the mathematical egg of silence. The eye makes space, the ear makes time, the mind makes silence. Sixth silence. The absolute book will be composed of citations from silence. Silence is at once immediate and remote. Its middle is missing. Noise is not the antithesis of silence, but merely its most minor modification. Silence is interior to itself. Seventh silence. Silence is the dwelling place of speech, but speech is not the dwelling place of silence. Silence opposes nothing, yet overcomes everything. There is only one silence. Silence is a thought rather than a thing. Last silence. Neither distance nor time can attenuate the broadcast of silence. The form of silence is also the content of silence. Silence keeps its secret. Blast silence. Okay, those are some aphorisms on silence. And now some three short, quick pieces to finish up. This one's called False Notes of a Thought Musician. The song says no, the song says yes, not in sequence, only there, right there, in the glare of. No infinite set exhausts all possibility. Another bad result. The set of even numbers. the set of odd. Long wait between infinities, so what? I have another destination, one that comes before one. Division wants to join. And here's a poem called Duo Session. It originally started out as some liner notes for my friend Brian Lucas, who's a musician, poet, and artist, for I believe it was a cassette release that he was putting out. But then it morphed into this poem, Duo Session. Nature music boxed. To work together is to work against. To be aware is to be at war. As one results in silence, two in sound. Wake up, says the hammer to the stone. Roar at earth's core. And listening requires practice. The smoke of location, the drift of rift after rift. Touch tentative as ants' antennas, an alphabet too busy for words. Incessant static looks for its story. Hit hidden objects, let percussive ideas become echoes of perception. X relaxes in the arms of chance, most casual causality, arbitrary tree. Finally to find, no final line, O lair of word within word. The song that can't be sung needs a special kind of lyre, Lyre. Okay, and then finally, a poem called Folk Art. I am a man on the lamb, depicted riding on a lamb, on the lamb, on a lamb, on the lamb, on a lamb. Get it? The demons say you don't. Thank you.
The demons will always say that, I think. Thanks, Andrew. Love it. We next hear from Kenneth Carrol. Is Kenneth Carrol in the house? We tried to get him our link, but maybe he's not here. Okay. We shall move on to Hedgehoggie. Hedgehoggie, are you ready?
Hedgehoggie is ready.
All right.
Hedgehog. The snail moves like a hovercraft, held up by a rubber cushion of itself, sharing its secret with the hedgehog. The hedgehog shares its secret with no one. We say, Hedgehog, come out of yourself, and we will love you. We mean no harm. We want only to listen to what you have to say. We want your answers to our questions. A hedgehog gives nothing away, keeping itself to itself. We wonder what a hedgehog has to hide, why it so distrusts. We forget the God under this crown of thorns. We forget that never again will a God trust in the world.
Thank you, Hedgehoggie. And that was a poem actually by Paul Muldoon. One of his best, in my opinion. Is Daniel Nestor in the house? No. Okay. John Bradley. John Bradley. Is John Bradley?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all. Thank Mark and Tony. And
Let me read your bio briefly. John's most recent book is Dear Morpheus, The Glue That Is You, from Dos Madres, one of my favorite presses in America. An exploration of sleep and dreams. It's his 12th full-length book of poetry, and John is the recipient of the James Tate Prize for Poetry for Spontaneous Mummification from Survision Books. He's also a frequent reviewer for Rain Taxi, and he's currently poetry editor for Cider Press Review. Welcome, John.
thank you, Mark. I want to read 3 poems. This first is called The Secret Life of Teeth. Marianne Moore had engraved on each tooth, I too dislike them. Hubert Humphrey soaked his teeth each night in a glass of akavit. Sophia Tolstoy loaned her teeth to a roving osteopath and then never saw them again. Henry Kissinger hid his teeth, along with that Nobel coin, in a bag of frozen peas. Ava Gardner placed her teeth inside a cedar waxwing in a velvet-lined cedar box. Jack Spicer, remember, called his teeth love letters to Lorca. Joan Didion, reading the mail, sharpened her teeth with a triangular metal file. Bishop Fulton Sheen bequeathed his teeth to a toothless monkey in Kuala Lumpur. Elizabeth Bishop pawned all her teeth for a taste of tender armadillo brain. I think that's the only poem I ever wrote with Bishop Fulton Sheen making an appearance. This next poem was inspired by an online rumor that someone's following Vladimir Putin and collecting his waste, so no one can analyze it and see if he's ill or near death or what medications he's on. So this is dedicated to that man, the man who collects Putin's excreta. He wears a bespoke silver suit with a zinc gray tie to make you forget you once saw him washing his hands with a small bottle of vodka in the baggage area at the airport. Last week, a reporter claimed she saw him at an oxygen bar in Moscow, shoelaces loosened, head back, eyes glazed. It said he doesn't like narrow hallways, the smell of rotting apricots, vowels that elongate the mouth. It said he's always followed by 3 aluminum hummingbirds. Before he sits down, he scrubs the seat with an antiseptic wipe, looks to see who's watching, then scrubs the seat again. It said his wife wears a diamond made from the thigh bone of a bioengineer who tried to emigrate to Germany. It said his teenage daughter has cotton candy pink hair and had all her teeth replaced. If you happen to see him stroll by, a black briefcase attached to the chain around his waist, 3 aluminum hummingbirds trailing him, best not to smile or nod. Best not to even think. What does the great leader do with all those packages of his waste? Does he have them incinerated, shipped off to Siberia to be stored in a mine? Or does he stroll each night, barefoot in his striped pajamas, to feed his desiccated feces to the blushing roses? This last one is dedicated to a man who can't stop telling us about Haitians in Springfield. And this is titled Each Night He Wakes, Wandering the Streets of Port-au-Prince. He sees bits of hair everywhere, falling from the sky, clinging to his flesh, sending down roots to suck the milk from his marrow. In ancient Greece, I could make the rocks rise and hurl themselves at anyone I so commanded, he recalls. But now the rocks lie there like dead bread. Look at Teddy Roosevelt sleeping in the doorway, smelling of goat shit. Moths eat away at his buffalo coat, beard, bare feet. This is the age of the knife with no handle that glides above the road, waiting for you to close your eyes. Copper, bronze, gold teeth. That's Charles Lindbergh pissing in the doorway, a long extension cord wrapped around his shoulder. This is what happens when you let them cut off your tongue and replace it with a tea cozy. Gold, copper, bronze teeth. Those unemployed actors, they swallow razor blades so they can eat cats, dogs, even geese alive. You're all a bunch of Neanderthals, I tell them. And that's a not so nice thing to say, even to them. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Wonderful reading. And just a quick call out again. Kenneth, Carrol, are you in the house? Daniel Nestor. Okay. We'll move on to our technical director, John Wessick, who is also regional editor of the San Diego Poetry Annual. He's published hundreds of poems and stories in journals such as the Atlanta Review, Berkeley Fiction Review, I-70 Review, Lovecroft's Chronicle, New Verse News, Patterson Literary Review, Pearl, Pyrene's Fountain, and many more. His most recent books are The Shaman in the Library and The Prague Deception. John.
Okay, this is called A Fart at the Opera. The genetic lottery conjugates fusillades of corn muffins at the parabola in the kitchen sink, the cisgender drill bit allopathic in all the right ways, waiting in a sunk cost fallacy. Socrates would have been proud, its Dior evening gown pregnant with apostrophes. Some say the Lincoln-Douglas debates are apocryphal, but Pressboard continues to outperform the bond market, and heirloom tomatoes are $2.79 a pound at Boney's. Be that as it may, the presidential press conference jogged chili cheese fries while world leaders erased. Swing voters ignited in a maelstrom of hailstones, largest parade ever in a Ziploc bag. Betamax, Laserdiscs, the Newton, all more user-friendly than the battleship Yamato's 18-inch guns. The Brooks range skips rope, slamming the basketball against the backboard in a pickup game with the Mekong Delta. Never say hit me when playing poker with Mr. Rogers, let alone when a caterpillar burrows into the subconscious with a backhoe. If you want to sing tenor, start with bathtubs.
Who wouldn't start with the bathtub, you know? Thanks so much, John. And well, we now have a little open mic section. We certainly have Cindy Hockman and Bob Heeman. Do we have anybody else, John?
We start with Vicky Kane. Vicky, you're up.
All right.
Hi there. Thanks very much. Okay, let me just move that. This is a short prose poem called Digging for Gold. Is this even the right area? No one is sure, but our knowledge is limited. Collections of identical particles appear to be color shifting through distant crystals, weaving intricate embroidery. But of what? There is very little communication. Even the microbes are silent. Bodies, hundreds, maybe even thousands, surround us, differing, yet so similar. Are they dead, asleep, or in suspended animation? They don't see us. When bigger sparks or limpid lights move, they seem both far and near. Our powerful light bombs fail to attract any organisms, so we use seismic techniques to study the layers beneath. Although confused and disorientated, we are still hopeful of a successful outcome. Relying on our reserve energy packs, we enter an area of complete darkness. Here, each light is isolated, and the information gathered is much less than expected. We don't even understand what it is we lack. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. Next we go on. Oh, you know, those microorganisms need to speak up, I think. Next we go on to our Lit Balm house band and start out with Cindy Hockman from her badass living room in badass Brooklyn.
Just wait until I move, which I may do within a year. Then, you know, it's going to throw everyone off, including me. This is a poem, an old poem from my ex-husband who sadly passed away last year. We remained good friends even after the divorce. It's called For You. And since Cassandra's not here, I don't feel obligated to read a prose poem, and this one is in couplets. For you. And you were there, first date, when we took a surrealistic bath. And you were there, through sexless nights of moons and tantrums. And you were there, propelling me safely over anxious mountains. And you were there, through violent valentines and all our gentle wars. And you were there, through tea time and toxins. And you were there, with your thumbs raised, your eyebrows raised, your penis raised, and your guard down. And you are here now, unsheepish, leading the herd. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Cindy.
Thanks,
I
Cindy.
really love that. Finally, we have Bob Heeman coming to us from his kitchen. Bob, what are you cooking up for us today? Hello, Bob.
He seems to have dropped off. Huh?
No, he's still here.
Is he?
I've asked him to unmute.
Oh, there he is. He fell asleep, I think. Looks like.
No.
Bob, you there?
Bob.
No. There he is, staring. Come on, Bob. All right. I'll take over for Bob for tonight.
Okay.
I'll do the last poem, which, speaking of absurdists, is called At the Bank. Filing patents is an expensive business. How do you define a wavelength of light to the common eye, or the speed of such in its in and out, its out and in, its inside from within? Dear sir, please acknowledge all documents received heretofore. You know there's more to come. Fill your pockets with light, he says, offering me a glass of pink bitters with a slice of lemon on the side. You forgot the combination, he says in a sly smile. Were we not about to look into that secret space of creation? How can you put a number on that? Nothing filled out, nothing gained, you say, and hope to leave it as that. I hesitate. Put this on paper, but filing patents is an expensive business. So you raise your glass and say, good riddance to all that. And that kind of is an expression of what's going on in the current electoral political process at the moment. Who the hell knows? But anyway, wonderful to be with you all here tonight, and a fantastic show. And I thank you again, Anne from the UK, Adeena, Will, Serpentwoman, Clayre Benzadon, Andrew, Hedgehoggie, and John Bradley and John Wessick, of course, for always joining us. Thank you. Lots of love and poetry. Keep yourself warm at night and hug each other and read lots of poetry. Love. Bye.